Hey there. I'm recording this on a Friday, so I hope you had a good week. I like that this is becoming a regular thing. You seem to be enjoying it, and I have to say that I am absolutely enjoying it. I'm working on Rosamund's sweater today, and I'm really having a good time with this project. It feels like a real holiday. It looks more complicated than it is, which is the kind of project that I really like to work on. I'll make sure that I put some close-up shots of it in there. It's meant to be a quick sweater. So originally, I thought that I would just do the entire thing in knit 2 purl 2 ribbing, because that's really great on something that you're knitting to fit a little wiggly animal, or a wiggly human for that matter. And that's what I was going to do, and then I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I thought, no, I want something a little fancy. So I have thrown a cable into the back panel. Nothing too crazy, but that's the nice thing about cables, really, is you don't have to get crazy to get a look that's rich, to get a look that looks like you worked a lot harder than you probably did when you were making the piece. So I love that. And this yarn, which is yet another stash mystery for me, is working up really well in the cables. And when I say stash mystery, I mean mystery. It was in stash, and there are 3 balls of it, and there were no ball bands anymore. But there was a note in my own handwriting from who knows when that said mystery merino. And it does seem to be merino. My guess would be superwash merino, but exactly who made it and when and how it got into my stash, I have no idea. That happens to me so often. I try to stay organized, but organizing my stash, that's something that always is about to happen next year. So I'm very happy I picked it because, as I was saying, it is working up very handsomely into the cables. It's springy and bouncy and a nice round cylindrical yarn. And so the stitch definition is extremely pleasant. So between the yarn and that I'm enjoying the yarn and that the cables are coming out the way that they hoped they would, and that I for once arranged the cables to not make it as hard as possible on myself. I chose cables that are all 2/2 because I can do those without a cable needle, and my cables always cross on the same round. Everybody who crosses, they all cross on the same round. So it's a complex looking project, but it's not a project that's turning out to be complex to knit. And that makes me happy. So I'm well into it. I've actually gotten to a point where I have set up for the steeks that I will cut open to make the holes for the forelegs in the piece. I'm working this butt upwards, so from the tail towards the neck, and having a good time with it. There's no pattern here. One of the things that I teach pretty regularly is my course on knitting to fit your pet. And it's interesting that that idea seems to throw a lot of people. Knitting to fit is one of the topics that I have found that quite a few knitters will get jittery at the idea. Even when it's not a case of designing something from the ground up to fit yourself, but even adapting an existing pattern to fit you better. Instead, what a lot of people do, what I tried to do when I first started knitting, is you just think, well, I'll just knit the pattern as it's written, and it won't fit me perfectly, but at least I'll have made it myself. And it took me a little while to realize a few things, including that, number one, if I did that myself with my knitting, I was going to be extremely unhappy because I am a short person with proportions that no standard sizing takes into account. And I realized partway through the first sweater I ever attempted to knit, I wound up pulling it back because I I happily realized fairly early on that I was not going to like the finished result. I realized that a sweater knit to standard sizing specifications was not going to fit me any better than an off-the-rack sweater would, that I would have the same issues, that there would be too much fabric here and not enough fabric there, and it was going to sag here and bulge there, and I was going to feel terrible after spending a ton of time and a ton of money on it. So learning to knit to fit, that was really sort of mandatory for me very early on when I became a serious knitter and wanted to work on fitted garments. I had to make friends with at least the fundamental concepts of knit to fit. And since I was forced to do it, I got over the discomfort and the fear very soon, very quickly, because what I discovered is that a lot of knit to fit, at its most basic, is not really that complicated. What you need to know are the measurements of the body part or parts that you want to stuff into the thing. And you have to know your gauge. There is no way to knit to fit that I can conceive of where you don't have to have a really solid idea of your gauge. So swatching is going to be a requirement. But if you know your measurements and you know your gauge, then those things together will give you stitch counts. And in terms of changing the size and shape of the thing that you're making as you move across the body part that you're going to try to cover with the knitting. So, for example, as you move from the hips towards the bust and shoulders in a knit to fit pullover, you grow and shrink just according to how your numbers change. It's not that complicated. Now, you can take it and you can refine it and refine it and refine it. And there are refined systems of extremely elegant, perfectionist knit to fit that are wonderful to learn about, wonderful to practice. But for the longest time, I've been doing things like knit to fit sweaters for Rosamund that, where I do sort of the quicker, easier version. And they work nicely. She looks good in them. She gets lots of compliments and treats and pats from strangers. And we live in a fairly touristy neighborhood. So in a normal summer, she winds up in a lot of people's vacation photos of the Wrigley Field area in Chicago, because that's where we live. So yeah, knit to fit, it's something that I feel really strongly about. Because here's the thing. So as I said, I'm not a standard size. And for the longest time, I felt bad about that. For all the years that I could not make things to wear for myself, when I had to shop off the rack, I felt so awful about my shape. And it's funny because people will assume, and it's really interesting, if you're a short guy, people will assume you feel bad about that you feel embarrassed about being short. Now, I can't speak for other short guys, but I can tell you that that's never bothered me. I like the height that I am. I'm accustomed to it. I've been this height for a long time. It works for me. The only frustrations, I will tell you, that occasionally it is really annoying not to be able to get to the top shelf of anything. And yes, that is annoying. However, it's just part of my everyday reality. And so you develop coping mechanisms. I mean, you have a choice. You can be hateful and upset, or you can just say, well, this is me, and this is how I am, and this is the way the world is going to be for me, and sort of get on with it, and that's cool. But what I could not stand was going shopping and trying on clothes over and over and over and over again, and nothing ever fit me properly. And that included things like excursions into the kids department. There was a point when I was the closest I'll ever get to being a string bean in my early 20s, when I could fit into a boy's size large, and it almost fit me. Almost. But those sweaters were too tight in the chest and a little bit too short, and they didn't quite fit right. And it used to make me feel that somehow I had failed, not by being short, but just by being non-standard, that there was this ideal, and I did not meet that ideal, and that must mean that I was hideously ugly. And I still have body image issues, let me tell you. I certainly do, and I think I'll fight those my whole life, no matter what I try to do. But the thing is, I'm trying to fight. But when I learned to knit, and specifically when I learned to knit to fit, and not just for sweaters, I mean things like mitts and gloves that fit my hand and not some imaginary person's hand that was always just a little bit bigger than mine, but to fit my hand, to fit my head, to fit my feet. The amazing thing that started to happen was I stopped identifying with a standard size. I was not, I am Franklin and I am a size, whatever. It's, I'm Franklin and I'm me size. My shape is the shape that it is. My hands are the size that they are. And I stopped feeling, to a large extent, that awful, awful sense of inadequacy in not fitting into off-the-rack clothes. It took me so long to realize that too. And I think about it now. I thought, well, that's odd. But it was very true that I felt terrible when off-the-rack sweaters, for example, did not fit me. Now it's the opposite. Now, well, I will be honest with you. Now I feel really guilty if I buy a sweater. A lot of you probably identify with that you become a knitter, crocheter, or whatnot, and you get used to, for example, making your own winter hats. And then the idea of having to buy a store-bought hat makes you kind of cringe because you could make a better one. Maybe if you had the time, you could totally make a better one, and you don't want to buy store-bought anymore. Now on the occasions when I have to try on a store-bought piece, if it doesn't fit me, I find myself thinking about the sizing standards, the cutting and sizing process, the pattern drafting process at that particular manufacturer, which has nothing to do with me. In fact, as I've gotten more into the business, the back side, the behind the scenes parts of the industry, the things that I have learned are really illuminating. That for example, different lines of menswear will have different size standards, and so this manufacturer's male medium is going to be different from that manufacturer's male medium, and not by accident. A lot of them will have a house model that will be their medium. Well, you're trying to fit that person, not me, not you. Just that person. Well, what are the chances, given the incredible variations in the human body, that you and a person out of a billion who happens to have been taken on as the fit model for a given manufacturer, that you will be the same size? It's almost impossible. And so I think that's why I really love knitting to fit. And I do it from the ground up. I mean, Rosamund sweaters, I swatch, I take measurements, and I cast on, and I work from one end to the other, growing the knitting where she grows and shrinking the knitting where she shrinks. And I also will do it in just little bits and pieces. It can even be just changing the cuff on a glove so that it's a length that I like, that works for me. It really has been one of the most empowering things about being a needleworker, being a maker, that has happened for me. And I wish it for everybody, because it's really nice. However long it takes, whenever you get there, it's really nice to realize that you are you, and you are you shaped. You are shaped like you. And you do not need to feel odd, insignificant, upset, anything at all about not fitting into an arbitrary set of size standards. I'm not, again, I have body image issues. I do. You'll hear me talk about them a lot because they're there and they're present all the time. And it's even difficult for me to put my face on camera. But I am better now than I used to be. And a big part of it is because I've learned to make things for myself and to make them to fit. So I guess those are my thoughts for today. That's what I'm thinking of. Thinking about knit to fit as I knit to fit, not myself, but as I knit to fit my dog. And I have to hurry up because we've been having a pretty nice spell of weather, but I think we have some cold coming up pretty soon. So yes, I'm going to sign off for now. I'm going to get back to work on this, and I am hoping to have this done in just a few days and on Rosamund, and then I can share some shots with you of what it looks like, for better or worse. I mean, if it doesn't fit, we'll try it again. But I keep knitting and measuring, and here's hoping. So yeah. So if you're getting ready to go into a weekend as you watch this, I hope it will be a good weekend. If you're not, if you're working constantly, or especially if you're working to help take care of the pandemic mess right now, bless you, thank you, hang in there, and I hope you get everything that you need to support your efforts that you're doing. And for the rest of you out there, let's all stay safe, be good to yourself, and be good to others. And we're all going to get through this. So yeah, enjoy your knitting. I'm going to go back to mine, and thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again in the next one. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel so you'll be the first to know about future episodes. Click like or leave me a comment to let me know your thoughts. And if you really, really liked what you saw, check out my Patreon campaign, where my patrons enjoy exclusive access to downloads, live streams, and other bonus material every week.